Next video is from a gentleman with a small YouTube channel, but he calls himself a Christian author, philosopher, and apologist, and he puts himself out there. It is Reverend Robert Clifton Robinson. So, Robert Robinson. Let's see what he has to say regarding what he considers to be historical proof of Jesus.
During the first 250 years after Jesus rose from the dead, 10 Roman emperors executed over 5 million Christians. Why?
Whoa. Okay. So, in the first 250 years after Jesus died, so that would be the period before Constantine when Christianity wasn't, and I understand Constantine didn't make it official, but that's kind of when it started getting friendly. That's the period where Christianity was in unofficial status in Roman Empire. The 10 emperors, I don't know the exact math there. It is a little bit confused because there were multiple emperors conserving at the same time. That was something that was happening in the period that they actually had an East and West emperor, and then official apprentices who were also kind of called Caesars. So I don't know what the count is there. But anyway, let's skip all that. Let's jump to this 5 million number. I tried to look up where he gets his 5 million number from. No idea. However, the consensus is of the scholars who have studied this thing and tried to put estimates on it, that the number of Christians around 250 AD was in the 6 digits of numbers at best. So it was fewer than 1 million Christians. Now, by the time Christianity was legal in the early 300s, it quickly grew to possibly 20 million-ish people. But around the time he's saying, the best scholars don't even say there was 1 million, let alone 5 million Christians existed. So that meant that every one of them died 5 times over or 10 times over. No, I'm sorry, Robert. 5 million Christians did not die because there had not been 5 million Christians around that time.
Why? Emperors were very tolerant of the religious practices of the nations they conquered, all except for one, Christians.
Okay, so there's a bit of truth to that. So emperors were very forgiving of the religious practices of the regions they conquered because most of the religions around the world were polytheistic at the time and were largely accepting of incorporating new gods, or at least acknowledging that other gods from other pantheons or from other religions may equally be real, and it's just not in their collection of the ones that they worship or acknowledge. So it was very easy for Rome to walk in and say, okay, all your gods are true, but also ours are true as well. So we're going to incorporate all that together. And that was pretty easy to do. But it makes sense that Christianity, the big monotheistic group, Jews before them, were a little less forgiving, and that caused some more friction, definitely, in the Christian group. Now, a bit of a side trivia, the word atheist, or what the etymology of the word we now atheist, was first applied to Christians because they weren't believing in these gods. So Christians, when they were being charged, sometimes were being charged with atheism. Just a bit of trivia for you.
The Romans viewed the idea that a man had risen from the dead as mental illness.
Okay, so no, the Romans did not care about a man rising from the dead at all. I went, again, searching for this. I've never read this in all my research, that Romans in particular had problems with men rising from the dead. No big deal. There's lots of stories of it around. And even less realistic is that they would have termed it some kind of mental illness because they had no concept like we would have now of mental illness. What most of the time when people had what we would consider mental illness, that was attributed to demons if they could tell that there was a problem, and the equivalent in other religions. But basically, no, they weren't saying Christians were demon possessed or possessed by spirits or however that was normally. So just none of that holds. Modern concepts of mental illness didn't exist at the time, and they didn't really have a problem with men rising from the dead. What they had a problem with was that you, my Christian neighbor, aren't praying to the rain gods. We need some rain.
They believed the sickness would infect the Roman Empire and destroy them. Now,
No, they didn't like that Christians wouldn't acknowledge the Caesars, the emperors, as gods. They didn't like that, and that was something they didn't want to spread. But no.
Christians would not renounce Jesus' resurrection because they had the eyewitness testimony of the men who saw him crucified and then alive.
All right, so if you've been following me for any length of time, then I need to ask you, Robert, what eyewitness testimony? Who are you talking about? I don't acknowledge that the Gospels are eyewitness testimony, which we're going to get to at length soon. Theoretically, if the 12 did see something, they were wandering around in the early days, but you're talking about in the first 300 years of Christianity, once the apostles died, no one had any direct eyewitness testimony. You're talking about just hearsay down the line. So all these martyrs you supposedly have, they weren't firsthand witnesses or even secondhand people who knew what this was. They were believing hearsay. And we all know that any religion can create followers who are willing to die for what they believe is true. That doesn't mean they had firsthand accounts. People are willing to die for wrong beliefs all the time.
There's no other reason that 5 million Christians died. The historical facts
500 million Christians didn't die. So tell me about the facts, though. That's great.
prove the resurrection.
Okay. The facts just prove the resurrection. All he's got was some bold assertion that 500 million Christians were martyred, which is, frankly, I had to make his case stronger for him. It's terrible. Not a good case, not a good evidence.